So far, there have only been raids on American diplomatic missions. So why in Sudan has the anger spilled over onto the British and German embassies?
Well, I think, when Muslim people relate historically and in recent past and contemporarily to the West, they don't necessarily distinguish between the colonizers and the neo-colonizers. So I think it really reflects the way that Britain and Europe has been relating, particularly Britain and France has been relating to the Arabs and Muslims for centuries. So it's no surprise that people in Sudan are reacting as well. But there is a bigger context here, because I think the fundamental lesson to be learned from the Arab Spring is that in the absence of a revolutionary mass organization for liberation against neo-colonialism, that actually the political forces on the ground will take advantage of that. So what we're seeing is the people organizing most of the protests are actually the open allies of NATO in the region. So the people organizing the protests are particularly the Salafi groups, Saudi-backed, Qatar-backed, etc. So these groups, did they say anything about blacks being lynched en masse in Libya? No. Did they say anything particularly about the NATO bombardment of Libya? No, they were actually the ground forces of NATO in Libya. So also we have to kind of go back to the root of this, which is Ayman Zawahiri announcing on 9/11 a few days ago that Yahya Libi, i.e. a leading al-queda member, which was most likely released by the Americans from Baghran in 2005, was assassinated by a drone earlier this year. It was for that reason that the protest took place in Benghazi and the American ambassador was lynched. So really we have to kind of connect the dots to the bigger political picture that we're seeing currently.
Now, Sukkant, the West has strongly condemned anti-Muslim propaganda really any time that it has emerged. So why doesn't this seem to have calmed the outrage that is spreading fast and wide?
I think Muslim sentiment is very sensitive to any kind of dehumanization and humiliation by the West. But again, I point to the political forces that are leading the protest. There's been reports that there's a protest in northern Lebanon in Tripoli. Who are the groups protesting in Tripoli and creating some ruckus? It's the same groups that are working for NATO in overthrowing Assad. To have a proper liberation project amongst any oppressed groups of the global South, there's two fundamental things you need. You need a revolutionary organization and revolutionary leadership and ideology. Of that, none of these groups have that. Hezbollah has that, Assad has that, Iran has that, Gaddafi had that, but these groups don't. They're serving the NATO interests in the region. So I think with the two US military carriers coming now from on the coast of Libya, with the situation in Syria, I think we're going to see some devastating developments in relation to the NATO attack on Syria. And I think this is also whipping up the Sunni supremacists against the war on Syria, Hezbollah, and Iran. So really, I think for NATO, for whatever moaning that they're doing, actually things are going quite sweetly for them in the region through these protests.
Now, Sukkant, you're a journalist and peace activist. I would like to know, what do you think happens next? How do you think Western governments should now be reacting to the situation, both diplomatically and on the ground? Are evacuations to be the next step?
I think Western governments do what Western governments do, which is to develop and intensify their hegemony and control. It's the onus is on the Arab and Muslim masses to develop actual viable forms of organizations and liberation projects to stop this NATO recolonization of the region.
All right, and finally, do you think this wave of violent protest threatens the future existence and role of some Western diplomatic missions?
Well, absolutely it does. But, frankly, Christopher Stevens dying, who did so much for NATO and the Americans in Libya, is a small price for them to pay, really, for the bigger war, which is the focus is Iran. Contextualize all of this in the war of Syria against Hezbollah in Lebanon and against Iran. That is the context I think we have to see this in.
All right. Sukkant Chandan, journalist and peace activist, live from London. Always a pleasure to have you on RT.